r/ProRevenge.
Build a driveway across someone else's property without permission? Pay the price. Not sure if this is pro enough, but here goes. I was visiting my friend at his dad's house in an area where the land is so steep all the driveways have to switch back up from the main road to the houses. A straight driveway is not an option because it would be steeper than the building code allows. A few doors down the road there lived a nice old couple who until recently had had a vacant lot next door to them, but the lot had sold and the new owner had started construction on a new house. Unfortunately, the lot was so steep that the new owner built his driveway partly on the old couple's land. It was carved out of the hillside with an excavator. This probably wouldn't have been a big deal if the new owner had approached the old couple first and asked nicely, but did he? Would I be telling this story if he had? In fact, the old couple had no idea what was happening until they came home one day to see a huge scar in the hillside snaking up from the road in front of their house, across the corner of their property, and winding upwards to where an excavator was working to prepare the land for their new neighbor's house. They were pretty upset, but being nice, reasonable people, they figured it was an honest mistake, so they went over to talk to the machine operator. He didn't know anything useful, but he was happy to give them the phone number of the new property owner. The old guy gave him a call and politely explained the situation, but his new neighbor, whom he'd never even met, was having none of it. He flat out denied that the driveway crossed the property line, and he was rude enough that the old guy was pretty upset. At this point the old couple weren't sure what to do. They double-checked the property pins to make sure they were right, and of course they were, but after further conversations with the new owner it was clear he was an unreasonable guy who wasn't going to come to the negotiating table willingly. The old couple didn't want to take legal action because that would have been expensive and, frankly, the damage to their yard was already done. At the same time, they couldn't just let someone walk all over them like that, especially if they were going to be living next door for the foreseeable future. So the situation stewed for a while as construction continued on the new house, until one day when my friend's dad saw the old couple in the neighborhood and they started chatting. Of course they told him the story about the asshole new neighbor. Now, my friend's dad really likes the old couple, who don't have a mean bone in their bodies, so he was pretty pissed about the situation, and when he went home he couldn't get it out of his head. That evening, after a few beers, he had a brilliant idea. He called up the old couple, explained his plan, and asked for their permission to carry it out. They chuckled and gave him the go-ahead, so he hopped into the rusty old full-size pickup he kept as a second vehicle and drove it over to the old couple's place, where he parked it across the encroaching driveway, making sure it was entirely on their property. The next morning the work crew arrived bright and early to find that they couldn't drive to the house they were building because some jackass had parked a shitty old F-150 across the driveway. They saw the note in the window with my friend's dad's phone number on it, so they called him to ask WTF. He explained that he had permission from the owners to park there and that, no, he would not move his truck so they could get to work. Furthermore, if anyone attempted to tow the truck they would be charged with trespassing and theft. There was no way the construction guys were going to haul all their tools up the hill by hand, and they didn't want to get in the middle of a legal battle, so they just called the new owner to let him know they'd be taking the day off and that they'd continue to take days off until the property boundary dispute was resolved. The new owner called the old couple in a fury, but the old couple told them the same thing my friend's dad told the construction workers. Basically, the vehicle was parked on their own property, so if he had a problem with that he could go fuck himself. To make an already long story shorter, the new neighbor ran it a while, but eventually he wanted his house to be built, so the nice old couple ended up with a significant sum of money in exchange for an easement allowing the driveway to pass across the corner of their property, and my friend's dad got several thank you cases of beer and the satisfaction that comes from putting an asshole in his place. Edits. Phrasing. This occurred in a small town in Canada. For those who think I made it up, thanks for thinking I'm so clever, but judging by the number of similar stories in the comments and people asking if this was in X town, I think this happens pretty often, not too surprising considering the number of houses built each year in the world. Regarding the legal questions and comments, the reason the guy built the driveway where he did was because it was cheaper and easier than making it all on his land, not because there was no other option, so most of your points, if not all, are moot. I'm on mobile so can't paint a picture, but imagine two lots next to each other on the uphill side of a road with the property boundary perpendicular to the road. The older couple live on the left when you're looking uphill. The new driveway is for the property on the right, and it snakes up the hill in a, roughly, S shape. The bottom 50 feet or so of the driveway crosses the old couple's land to reach the road. I'm not sure if any trees were harmed in the making of this post. The driveway was done by the time I saw it, but the couple didn't make that an issue, so I suspect not. Yes, my friend's dad drove after drinking a few beers. Every hero has his flaw. Thanks for reading. TLDNR. Neighbor built a driveway across someone else's land without permission and wouldn't compensate them for it, so they parked a truck across it to block access to his land until he would negotiate.
A response to the post.
/r/legal advice would say to get a real estate lawyer, and that if any trees were cut down to make the new driveway, the old couple could have made an even bigger check from asshole. Some states award 3 times damage for trees, and old mature trees can run into the tens of thousands.
A response to the post.
My dad knew a barber who had a building with apartments and first floor retail and a parking lot in a part of the city that was changing. One day there is a huge hole there and a gas station is being built next to the parking lot. Every day he'd go outside and eyeball the place. My dad saw him one day and asked what he was doing. He told me, Dad, that he thought the gas station tanks were buried on his property. My dad was a civil engineer and went and surveyed the property for him. The guy waited until the station was done and having a grand opening to get an injunction from a court to shut the place down. The tanks were only over by a foot. The company asked what he wanted. He said for them to buy him out of his retail property and the parking lot. They laughed and said they only wanted to buy 2 feet of his land. He laughed and said they'd buy it all or move their tanks. This is how a hard-working barber retired to Florida when he thought he'd never be able to sell his building. Edit. Typo.
A response to the post.
Neighbor revenge is the best revenge.
A response to this comment.
When I was a kid, my parents were having a dispute with the neighbors over a shared fence. One night, my friends and I were feeling mischievous and egged that neighbor's house. Of course we got caught and had to clean up the mess the next day in a display of shame. My father confided in me years later that he was happy with what I had done. We had a good laugh over that.
A response to the post.
I want to live in a place where I need a switchback in the driveway.
A response to this comment.
Walk to the mailbox. What a beautiful day. Walk back from the mailbox. Cass, why have you failed me?
A response to the post.
Why didn't the old couple go to the town and report the new neighbor for code violations? The inspector would have come out and stopped all progress on that work site real quick.
A response to this comment.
Some towns have such high levels of bureaucracy that even lawyers look more appealing to deal with. Source. I live in a city where all but 2 of the council members are continually suing each other for he said, she said bullshit, rather than serving the community they live in. Not saying this is the case with Ops Town, but it's certainly a possibility.